Hey everyone, this is Bobby and Alex with Rejigg. Appreciate you all joining. We're going to give folks a couple more minutes here to hop on. So I appreciate your patience. We'll get started in just about a minute or so. Thanks. All right, folks, thank you for joining. This is Bobby and Alex here with Rejigg. Today we'll be chatting through some off-market deal sourcing. Appreciate you all joining so punctually. Just a couple of quick logistic things before we get started. We ask that you stay on mute for the meeting. There'll be a chance to ask questions at the end. If you have questions in the meantime, you can put them in the chat here. We will try to get to them as they come in. But with that, we'll kick it off. Maybe Alex will let you introduce yourself first, and then I'll go.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Rejigg and excited to get into it.
And I'm Bobby. I lead the buyer side of the platform here at Rejigg. So if you've used the platform before, I'm sure we've probably interacted. If you're new to the platform, I'm sure I'll get a chance to meet you at some point.
Great.
Let's dive in.
So just a little bit, we'll talk a little bit about Rejigg, and then get into some of kind of our buyer sourcing funnels, which we think might be helpful for searchers to benchmark their own processes, and then talk a little bit about our platform and how it works. So just to kick us off, just a little background about Rejigg. So we started 2.5, almost 3 years ago now. We're a venture-backed, San Francisco-based startup. We have an office in Chicago, which is where Bobby and I are today. So we're kind of split between San Francisco and Chicago. Our team's backgrounds are in MBA programs. I was an MBA student and interested in search, and so kind of come at it from that angle. My co-founder Barrett, mom and small family business that he helped her exit. And a lot of us have worked at kind of venture-backed marketplace startups in the past. And we believe there was a way to make proprietary, kind of unbrokered search less painful for both buyers and sellers. So the core of our platform is creating 30-minute conversations between buyers and sellers.
Yeah, and to just like double click there, right? We're essentially running a very similar playbook on our sourcing side that you would be if you were spinning up your own proprietary search efforts. We'll get more into that in a second, but the core of that is cold calling, email campaigns, running some targeted advertising, direct mailers. We've used all of these channels in different capacities over the course of the last 3 years, and I think mostly honed our approach a decent amount, and so that's what we're going to get into in the next few slides.
So what is Rejigg? So we're a platform for buyers and sellers to meet. We're really focused on $250,000 up to $2 million of EBITDA. We have certainly things bigger on the platform and a few things smaller, but that I'd really describe as our sweet spot. Focus on companies that have been around for a while, that have recurring revenue, probably a lot of the same features that most people who are looking to transact a business are interested in. What's critical about Rejigg is that we source all our own businesses. So we call hundreds of businesses each week and ask them if they're open to meeting buyers like yourself. Because this is the way we do sourcing, our leads are almost exclusively off-market, unbrokered, and exclusive to Rejigg. We are running a kind of scaled search fund essentially on one side of our platform. Really what we're trying to build is a high-fidelity marketplace. So if you send a message on our platform, you should expect to get a response, and I think that's what we're really focused on. Since starting, we've introduced over 2,000 searchers to over 1,000 different sellers. There have been 200+ offers on the platform, and we've closed 17 deals to date. we're on a pace where we're pretty consistently closing at least 2 per month in 2025. So that's kind of the platform to date. So let's get into a little bit about our sourcing numbers. Again, the reason we share these is we hope that folks who are doing their own sourcing are finding this helpful comparisons. So first, let's just talk a little bit about why we like calls so much. So this is our historical success rate of doing both calls and emails. We've done tens of thousands of both. But in terms of our ability to, and how we define success is these are businesses that are listed on the platform. So owners who, not only express that they are selling, but that they are also interested in meeting with our buyers. What we find is that on the phones, we're about 2/3% of the time that we have a unique phone number and then we put them through a sequence, we're able to get them on the platform. That equivalent number for email is just under 0.1%. And so it's 6 or 7 times more effective in our experience to pick up the phone and call. Obviously, calling is more than 6 or 7 times as expensive than email, which is low marginal cost channel. But obviously, in a world with limited leads, I think that it's essential just to pick up the phone and call owners. And we have more detail on the next slide, but just kind of want to start with a little bit of kind of context setting about why we find calling to be so effective.
And another important piece to note here too is that we are almost exclusively calling mobile phone numbers. I think we did very early on experiment calling corporate lines. Sometimes those numbers are easier to get, and oftentimes it's harder to get in touch with the decision maker, or you get routed through a call tree. So these numbers are calling exclusively mobile phone numbers. It's just important note there.
So this is our actual sourcing funnel for an almost 18-month period here. And in that time, we made 383,000 outbound phone calls. This is not unique numbers, but it's the number of actual outbound dials that we did. Over that time, pretty consistently, about 10% of the calls connected. So, the reality is most people don't pick up the phone from unwanted numbers. So, but what we've seen is historically about a 10% pickup rate. Of those, obviously not all of them are interested in selling their business, right? So about 5% of the owners that we talk to are interested in selling in some capacity. Of those, half of them were able to list onto Rejigg, just over half. And then of those, about 6% have received an LOI on our platform. What I'd say at a high level is, again, the reason we share this information research, we hope that it's helpful for you as many of you are probably doing your own proprietary outreach and thinking about, how many numbers am I going to need in my universe to say, talk to whatever your goal is, to talk to 10 owners a week or to submit an LOI every month or whatever it is, and kind of help you work backwards on what that is. And so, if you're doing your own proprietary outreach and your goal is to meet with a handful of owners a week, just understand that is probably at least 500 or 1,000 outbound calls in a week. And so I think this is the reason we share this, just to kind of help benchmark you and your processes as you go forward.
And there also is a little bit of lag in these numbers, right? So we have, for example, almost 100 businesses we've listed in the last month that may at some point receive an LOI. So those are included here in the listed on Rejigg numbers, but really haven't practically had a chance to go through the process and get an LOI. And similarly, there have been connected calls that may translate into listings at some point in the coming months. So there's a little bit of a lag, but generally these numbers have been pretty consistent for the last 2 years.
We also just want to share a little bit about how we approach our sales process. So we have kind of a snippet of our sales script, if you will. So what we do when we pick up the phone is, hi, we're Rejigg. We have a platform full of buyers who might want to talk to you. Business owner says, interesting, that's new. it's been on my to-do list to kick off this process. I know I need to retire eventually, but I haven't liked the brokers, I haven't liked the process, so I haven't started. And we say, well, we can get you listed on our platform in just 30 minutes, and you can be talking to buyers in the next few weeks. How does that sound? The business owner says, interesting. It sounds like a lot better than just getting cold calls all the time. How much does it cost? And Rejigg is free to owners, so that's a big selling point. But at that point, we say, do you want to give it a try? And then we move into onboarding. So that's kind of our typical sales pitch.
I'm gonna pause quick. I just want to hit on it. So Anna asked a question here in the chat. We'll get into some of these points later on, but just to answer her question. So in terms of how we source the phone numbers, we're not doing anything revolutionary on the sourcing front in terms of how we build our database that we're calling from. We're subscribing to different third-party data providers like SourceScrub, ZoomInfo, Brada, names that I'm sure most of you have probably heard. We whittle down that list and we do some cross-referencing to make sure our data is accurate, and we're reaching out to businesses that meet our size criteria and geographic criteria, and that are ideally bootstrapped or owner operated. But in terms of how we source the numbers, it's very much through third-party data providers. In terms of the second question she had was on what percentage of the LOIs are accepted and closed. Super rough numbers here, but generally about half of the LOIs that are submitted get accepted, and about a third of those end up closing. So call it 15% of submitted LOIs lead to closed deals. Might be a little bit higher than that due to, again, some of the lag. But that's the very rough numbers. And then lastly, in terms of the activity rate among sellers, we try to make sure that all sellers on Rejigg are being responsive to potential buyers. So the accepted conversations, if you reach out to a seller, the odds that the seller gets back to you is about 80% historically if sellers get back to buyers upon request. And if they don't, you can rest assured we're reaching out to that seller to get them to respond. And if they continue to be unresponsive, we take them down from the platform. So generally speaking, if you request a conversation through Rejigg, you can expect a response within 24 to 48 hours. Sorry, Hinch, back to
you. So just a little kind of platform success story. So this is an actual message sent on our platform that ended up resulting in a transaction. We just like to share it kind of as an example of what we've seen work from searchers and how they reach out to owners. So this is somebody who introduces themselves, a little bit about themselves personally, where they're based, the business school they went to, military service, the things that we think, owners sometimes like to hear. And then a little bit about why the business specifically is of interest to them. So they're doing a thesis-driven search, looking to acquire a single MSP in the next 12 months between this range. Obviously, that range matched with the target company. So, tailoring your message to say, this is, something I'm looking for. I'm excited to talk to you. We're prepared to close the deal. And happy to answer any questions and move forward is I think kind of a successful example of what searchers have done well on our platform. So this is a message that led to a transaction 8 months later. A not so successful story. This is again an actual message sent on our platform. They said, "Hi, the owner's name. I'm focused on nonprofit tech," which was what this business was, and I would love to learn more. This led to the owner reluctantly taking an initial call with the searcher and then closing the conversation and providing the feedback that the searcher lacked. This is the quote, maturity and awareness to buy their business. And so what I'd say is, I think you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so I think that it's important to put a good foot forward. And definitely the kind of through line of what we've seen works well on the Rejigg platform.
Yes.
No, you want so then just maybe a little bit about our platform and kind of some of the history. Anna gets to some of your questions as well. So we have an 80% response rate to requests on the platform. I'd love to see that number be 100. Owners are a little bit fickle, but our goal, to Bobby's point from earlier, is if you're sending a message 80, as close to 100% of the times as we can, you're going to get a response from the owner to that request. what we find is that active searchers are generally taking 3 to 7 calls a month with qualified targets. And that every 25 calls that an active searcher takes on the platform, they're submitting an LOI. So, kind of do the math, but it's like if you're on our platform, you're active, you're taking, 5 calls on average a month. Within the first kind of half a year, we expect you to start submitting LOIs somewhat regularly on the platform. And that's again just not revolutionary, but it just lines up with our view that we can really enhance the proprietary search channel, that element of your search, and that this will lead to LOIs and deals on the platform.
And so next up, we're going to dive in a little bit to how the Rejigg platform works and how you might be able to use it to supplement your proprietary search. But very quickly, first, taking a step back, right? When we're reaching out to owners, we are running a very similar playbook to a lot of traditional proprietary search. But our value proposition is a little bit different to a seller in that we say, if you're thinking about selling, we know you probably get inundated with requests. Instead of having to sort through those, come to Rejigg. You'll have more autonomy in your search. You can accept and reject conversations and really drive your own process. So that helps us really sell the platform to a lot of owners. It is a little bit different than the pitch a self-funded searcher is making. That said, there are some advantages on the self-funded search side in that you can be a little bit more specific. You can build a personal relationship. You may have, as we hinted at before, a specific thesis in an industry, and you can be very well versed in a way that we cannot afford to be because our outreach is so broad by necessity. So there's a little bit of a difference in terms of the nature of the outreach, despite the playbook being similar. Let's dive into to just show you how the Rejigg platform works once we actually get these leads onboarded. So if you were to create a Rejigg account, I know some of the people on this call already have one, and so this will be a little bit, this will not be new information for you, but this is what our listing page looks like. So this is the main page on Rejigg where we add every single listing that we've onboarded. Each of these listings, we generally collect enough information to put together what you'd probably see in a teaser if you were to compare it to a brokered process. So we collect high-level financial information. We try to understand the owner's rationale for selling. We get uploaded financial documents. All of those are visible to buyers. And right now we have about 500 businesses on the platform. We're adding about 20 new businesses each week. We recently scaled up our sourcing team. So that number should be growing quite a bit in the coming months, but right now we're right about that 500 business mark. So this is what I was hinting at before, talking about how our listings generally look like a teaser at first. The idea here is to give you enough information for you to decide whether or not it's worth an initial introduction. So this is what the listing looks like. To the extent that you're interested, you can message the seller directly. So we, Rejigg, try to stay out of the way as much as possible. If you want to reach out to a seller, there's a green message owner button, which you can see in the bottom right here. That will let you send a pitch directly to the owner. So you'll write a short message, and that will go directly to the seller. They'll get an email notification letting them know that a buyer reached out, and most sellers get back and respond within 24 to 48 hours. So this is another example of what that chat interface looks like. So the first step is generally agreeing on a time to meet for that introductory call, which you can schedule through the platform. This is what our scheduling tool looks like. So we have a couple of options to schedule that first call with a seller. One is the interface you're looking at here, which sends a meeting invite to both parties with a Zoom link for a video call. The other option is one that we recently introduced, which is a direct dialing method. So some sellers enable a direct dialing through our proxy calling system. So there'll be a phone number that you can call that will connect you directly to the seller in a similar way that DoorDash or Uber, if you've used those platforms, they use a proxy dialing system where you don't actually see the owner's phone number. You just get rerouted to them. It's a similar thing that we're doing. So you can, in some cases, call that business owner or seller directly. So apparently the next step looks something like this. At least this is what ChatGPT thought it looked like. You hop on the phone, you get to decide if there's mutual interest. And then if there is, You continue on, you can sign an NDA through the platform. That's what this interface looks like. You can sign an NDA, at which point the seller can release their data room to you, which looks something like this. So that's the standard flow, 90% of the time, introductory call between the buyer and the seller. If there's mutual interest, you sign the NDA, get access to the data room, and from there, you're off to the races. I'll stop briefly just to hit on a couple questions in the chat. So the first was whether or not we focus on any businesses in Canada. We really don't at this point. Basically, everything is based in the United States at this time. And then the second question, are the listings absolutely proprietary? So the short answer is effectively yes. We don't require exclusivity from the sellers on our platform. So if they decide they want to go hire a broker after the fact, they have the ability to, but most don't, since they're paying nothing on Rejigg to get introduced to buyers, and therefore it's often not in their best interest to agree to pay a broker a huge fee to do similar work. So they are effectively proprietary because we are sourcing them in 9 times out of 10, probably more than 9 times out of 10, they're not hiring a broker. Very rarely we will come across an owner who is already listed with a broker who still wants to be on Rejigg. That is less than 5% of our listings today, but occasionally you might stumble upon that. More question here. How many times is data room populated? So in terms of like data room financials, so because these are off-market deals, there's not very often a SIM prepared. What is normally in the data room is 3 years of historical financials, the most recent balance sheet, sometimes a business overview, key employees, some of those very high-level initial diligence docs for you to review and decide if it's worth making an offer, right? But oftentimes not a full SIM. So don't go into the data room expecting to see something like that. It can oftentimes be a little bit disorganized, but generally has what you need in there to be able to assess the business. Right now, we have data rooms populated for, I think it's 65% of the companies on Rejigg, and the vast majority of the new businesses that we are adding, we're collecting those up front. So hopefully that number trends up closer to 100. I wish it was there as well. But most of the businesses do have a data room populated on Rejigg at this time. So we talked about the data room access. Just to wrap up a couple of the final platform features. If you want to submit an offer, you can do that through the platform, whether it's an LOI, an IOI, or even something more informal. We have the ability to submit offers through the platform. And from there, you're off to the races. So last thing here, and then we'll field some questions. So in terms of how if you want to use Rejigg to help supplement your proprietary search, it's easy to get started. You can create a free account on Rejigg that'll let you browse through all of our listings, and you can make up to 20 requests with sellers before having to subscribe. For our free users, the way our revenue model works is we are paid a transaction fee by the buyers at close. So for our free users, that transaction fee is 2.5% of the transaction value. But our core product for buyers is $150 per month subscription and a 1.5% transaction fee. So if you want to get started, you can make the free account. You can go through our listings, decide if there's enough there that makes it interesting for you to subscribe. If you decide to become a subscriber, we're running a discount code here for you, which will give you $50 for the first month with this code DEALS100. So that expires on Friday. If you want to give it a shot and have a cheaper first month, you can feel free to. But if more broadly, if you have any questions, our emails are here. You can feel free to reach out anytime, and we're happy to help you out as you get started. All right, so let's see if we have any questions here. You want to field this one?
Yeah, Mark had a question that asked about more details about our cold outreach script and how we handle rejections. I mean, what I'd say at a high level is, I think as Bobby alluded to, I think our outreach is a little different in that we're asking people to join kind of a platform and have an open mind and take calls from a lot of buyers. So I think it's a little probably different than a searcher does, but a lot of the objections are asking about the qualifications of our buyers and us reassuring them that searchers can buy businesses and that people on our platform are ready to move forward. But yeah, I mean, I think our ad's a little different, but we're focused on, you know, a lot of the ask is about, or a lot of the objections about convincing an owner that this is a viable way to sell a business as opposed to working exclusively through a broker.
And as you can imagine, there is very much a system in place for tracking warm leads as well, if that's what you're getting at. So it's not uncommon for us to connect with a seller who says, call me back in a year. And of course, we call them back in 6 months to make sure that they haven't changed their mind early. But we're tracking all of those warm leads in our system too, which goes back to my earlier point about some of our data, there being a lag in some of our data. But we obviously have at the front end, we have sequences where we're calling and emailing it up front. We have systems for tracking warm leads. And so we're trying to be as efficient as possible about making the most of those lead lists. We had another one come in. Once an LOI is signed. So the question from Ben about exclusivity upon signing an LOI. So on Rejigg, it's the exact same as you'd expect in any other deal process. If you sign an exclusive LOI with a seller, the business is immediately delisted and until either you acquire the company or the exclusive diligence period ends and the seller asks to be relisted. So you can expect full exclusivity upon signing an LOI as you would in any other process. All right, any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. We have our volume off here, so if you're unmuted asking them, we might not hear you, but we'll give another 10 seconds here to see if anyone has some last minute questions. Want to take this?
Okay, yeah. So few questions. Anna, we do some. So Anna asked, "Do we source by industries or offer that service?" So I will say that we have done some arrangements with individual firms or searchers to do some kind of proprietary off-market sourcing, and happy to talk about that. I'd say, in general, I'd say it's not. I wouldn't say. I guess what I would encourage you to do is to try the platform first. I think that you'd be maybe surprised at the amount of things we have on the platform that would fit your search, unless it's extremely niche. But happy to talk offline about the kind of arrangements that we do in that vein. Another question here: do you take lead referrals? So we do have a referral program, and we're happy to and love working with people who can send us leads. I know that searchers end up often with leads. Obviously, we'd want those leads to be unbrokered, but obviously can do that. And feel free to send us an email afterwards if you want to learn more about our referral program. Question about LOI templates. So we do have LOI templates on an LOI template on the platform, which you're welcome to use, but you are absolutely not required to use our LOI template. No. The question about Canada. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't really cover Canada. Unfortunately, don't have great data sources of Canada at this point. So we're not sourcing anything explicitly in Canada at this point. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, but not at this point.
Hold on. It was very fast getting through those 4 questions. Anything else, folks? All right, next question.
We do, yes.
We use Orem. Exactly. Yeah. So what the question was, what do we use any tools or power dialers to speed up the calling process? So we do use most of our team uses Orem. Everyone has their own personal preference on how many calls they like to run simultaneously. Some just do one at a time. Some do multiple at a time. But they found it helpful for tracking. So Orem has been our go-to there. Anything else? All right. Well, appreciate all of you joining. If you have any questions, our emails are on this slide. If you join from Search Funder, I'm gonna post a link to this recording after the call, so you can always reference back. But yeah, please reach